Drake's Janice STFU is the most listened to song in America, probably the world right now, and was a second week #1 in a row. Almost everyone's reviewing it and interpreting it as a Kendrick diss track. And I don't think that's wrong, but it's only partly a diss. That reading misses the structural argument that the song's actually making. And structural arguments matter because Drake's argument inside the song is the same argument that pre-stages Universal Music Group's options in handling his upcoming contract negotiation. So the same argument Ed Sheeran's Warner exit 2 weeks ago as a template. It's the same argument that determines how much Drake can extract from his next label deal. So I want to walk through this song bar by bar, verse by verse, chorus. We're going to go and look at what each cluster of bars is actually doing at the cultural level, the personal level, the institutional level. So by the end, I hope you're going to see why this song is the cleanest single track statement that Drake has ever made of how artists actually leave their record labels, and why the institutional class, the people who run UMG, as well as Warner and Sony, should be reading the song as a notice of intent from not just Drake, but probably artists to come. So we'll start with the title, because this title is doing more work than the conventional read allows. The audio that closes the track is the sample, "Hey Janice STFU," from Tony Soprano. And that phrase, it's not original to Drake. The fan decode community identified it. It's Tony dismissing his older sister, Janice. The Sopranos identification isn't artist confirmed. Drake hasn't named the source, but the cultural reference fit is clean enough that the major fan analysis outlets have already settled on this as a canonical reading. And if you've watched The Sopranos, you know what Janice represents. So she's older sibling of Tony, keeps returning from the ashrams, claiming enlightenment while leveraging her family for material support. So she's a manipulator, spiritual fraud, the one who fakes depth while extracting from everyone around her. Now, Tony still loves her, but he also has to repeatedly silence her. And the STFU Janice moment in the show is one of its recurring tonal beats. It's the family member who fakes spiritual depth while extracting from everyone around her, repeatedly told to be quiet. So if you map that onto who Drake is addressing on this track, he spent the last 2 years inside a public war with Kendrick that revolves around competing claims of authenticity. Drake, the chart pop machine; Kendrick, the conscious rap moralist. So Drake spent the entire Iceman album rejecting that framing. "I'm fighting the man, not suing a rapper. You boys are not listening," from Bees on the Table, is the most explicit version of that. And Janice STFU doesn't say this structural line directly, but the title says it. And by choosing the Soprano sample as the closing tag, Drake is mapping Kendrick onto Janice Soprano, the fake conscious sibling who extracts from the family while pretending to be above the family business, the one Tony loves but has to silence. So that's the primary read. But there's a second reading that's actually probably more accurate to what the song is doing structurally. And the chorus mechanics give it away. So the chorus alternates. Drake delivers an intimate verse addressed to a woman named Emiliana. Then the music drops out for "Hey Janice STFU" over and over. The pattern repeats throughout the track. So that structure isn't ambiguous. The thing that is being interrupted is Drake's romance with Emiliana. The thing doing the interrupting is Janice in the song's own staging. And it's whatever keeps interrupting his personal life with public commentary. Janice is the press. Janice is the gossip culture. Janice is every podcaster and tabloid and X account that won't shut up about his career, his relationships, his beef. Janice is the noise that exists in the gap between what Drake is doing and what people are saying about it. So I think the song's title is a command directed at the media, dressed up as a command directed at a character. The Sopranos sample is a cultural delivery vehicle. The actual target, though, It's a surveillance apparatus that comments on Drake's life. So read that way, the song is structurally a love letter to Emiliana, interrupted repeatedly by the world telling Drake about himself. The romance is the part of his life he wants kept. The commentary about him is the part he wants silenced. The track is a 4-minute version of, I'm trying to have a real moment with this woman, and I need you all to be quiet. So there's a third reading that's been circulating since the track dropped that I want to touch on also. A Joe Budden podcast clip has resurfaced where Budden joked that Janice is his white woman name, his alter ego for what he wants to act like when he wants to act like a Karen. The clip ends with Budden saying STFU. The internet noticed Janice plus STFU plus Joe Budden plus Drake's well-documented contempt for the Joe Budden podcast historically added up to a theory. So this is a subliminal directed at Budden, layered underneath the Sopranos cultural anchor. Now, Budden has addressed the theory himself twice on his own podcast, and once he said the internet had put 2 and 2 together, and he admitted, I'm Janice. But on a subsequent episode, he walked it back. Nah, I didn't hear it. Now, DJ Academics, one of the most connected voices to the Drake camp, has also weighed in on the other side, saying that the Janice in the song is, quote, a woman Drake was involved with, end quote. Not Budden, not Jay-Z, not the Sopranos character, a specific woman in Drake's orbit. So which Janice is the right one? I think the honest answer is all of them simultaneously. And that's how Drake builds his title level references. The same operational architecture as the 14-year Lucian by name lyric arc. He names the human at one level, so the same word lands at multiple levels for multiple audiences. In Stay Schemin' in 2012, he said, tell Lucian I said F it. And that worked as both a flex and as a personal call out, depending on what you knew. Janice STFU works as a Kendrick map onto Janice Soprano and as a Joe Budden subliminal and as a media personification and, per academics, as a specific woman in Drake's orbit. So the casual mass audience hears the most surface read. The Sopranos literate hears the cultural angle. The hip hop podcast watching hears Budden. The gossip orbit hears whoever academics is pointing at. Each audience walks away with a version that they have the context to hear. So treating that multi-headedness as confusion is missing the point. The architecture is the argument. Drake compressed 4 to 5 separate targets into a 4-syllable track title that debuted number 1 and broke an all-time chart record. The cleverness is the operational thesis. He's saying I can hit multiple targets with the same word and break the record doing it. Okay, the title is doing 4 levels of work, so let's get into the chorus now. The chorus alternates intimate verses addressed to Emiliana with the STFU command that he's directing at Janice. So the pattern is reach me, baby. Call my phone and say you need me, baby. I'm so green. You got to teach me, baby. From Vancouver, you're a BC, baby. Pull up my Bach, beep, beep, baby. And my came with the heat seats, baby. Swear my label got to free me, baby. Blow on me just like some green tea, baby. And then, Janice, STFU. So 2 things are happening in this chorus. First, who's Emiliana? The fan decode community has converged on Amelia Hamlin, model daughter of Harry Hamlin and Lisa Rinna, formerly linked to Scott Disick. Drake hasn't confirmed the identification. That's standard posture for him. He encrypts personal references at title or hook level, and he lets the audience decode it. But the fan decode community for Drake has settled on her across major outlets covering the track. And there's a geographic detail in the chorus that at first reads as a mismatch. From Vancouver, you're a BC baby. Amelia obviously is LA based with her parents. So why BC baby? The mismatch resolves once you account for the fact that her parents' career patterns. Harry Hamlin has worked frequently in Vancouver, so has her mom, Lisa. Vancouver, often called Hollywood North production hub for film and television. The Hamlin-Rinna family has long documented Canadian presence patterns, including Muskoka Cottage in Ontario. If you've watched the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which I have, so they've spent a lot of time in Vancouver for production work, and that could read as a BC baby in the geographic childhood imprint sense, even if her adult home is in California. And the Muskoka Cottage detail is independently relevant because Drake's own Muskoka presence has been well documented. The cottage country geography that is just north of Toronto is part of his ongoing visual and lyrical vocabulary. The two geographies overlap structurally in ways that make the Hamlin family the most biographically coherent fit for the Emiliana identification. Now, none of that has been confirmed by Drake. It's just fan decode plus biographical plausibility. The structural argument I'm going to make next, though, doesn't depend on identification being right. It depends on Emiliana being a real specific person rather than a poetic abstraction. And the chorus mechanics argument works regardless of whether Emiliana is Amelia Hamlin or somebody else that Drake isn't naming. So now the second thing in the chorus, look at the seventh line, swear my label gotta free me, baby. So that bar is doing the structural work here. Drake is telling Emiliana that his label has to free him, not negotiating, not asking, gotta. The framing is the freeing. It's something the institution will be compelled to do, not something Drake will request. So hold that thought, and we're coming back to it because it pairs with another bar in verse 2 that completes the structural argument that the song is making. But notice what's happening here at the chorus level. Drake is staging a romance with a real specific person, interrupted repeatedly by a command to shut up, directed at the public. And the chorus delivers the romance bar, then the music drops. Then, hey, Janice STFU. So it's a romance interrupted by surveillance, and inside that romance bar, Drake is telling his partner that his label has to free him. The personal frame and the institutional frame are stacked on top of each other in that same chorus. The romance can't continue with the press watching. The career can't continue with the institution holding him. Same problem at two levels, same posture in response. And then there's a particularly sharp piece of operational irony to note here, that the all-time biggest commercial moment of Drake's career so far, this song's chart performance, is a song titled Shut Up About My Life. So he scaled the all-time platform with a song whose argument is please stop watching me. The audience he's telling to be quiet is also the audience that brought him to the mountaintop, number one. So that's a level of operational irony nobody else in the genre is currently constructing. Okay, title, chorus, and now verse 1. The verse opens with a buried alive, someone come dig me up. That's the opening posture. Drake describing himself as entombed. By what? By the narrative. The Kendrick won the round consensus. The trade press think pieces about his commercial decline. The fan cycle analyses of who was up and who was down. Drake's framing in the opening bar of his number one single is, I've been buried by you all. Now I'm climbing my way out. Then if I call you up, if I call your shorty up, she's picking up. Yeah, that's obviously a sexual flex directed at Kendrick in its standard hip hop diss vocabulary. But then you boys got big off my name. That's big enough. So this is a bigger argument than it sounds. This is Drake accusing other rappers, Kendrick and the others in the orbit, of having built their commercial profiles by being in conflict with him. So their fame in his framing is derivative. They are big because they were in opposition to Drake. They've extracted commercial value from his name. And he's saying enough. Then we know how you OGs rocking already. The jig is up. So Drake's calling out the older artists, the OGs. The framing is the older generation of artists who've been positioning against him. Their pattern is now exposed. The jig is up. And now we get to verse 1's most important structural bar. They say the truth will set you free. Well, mine is gone stream while you watch in HD. So this bar is doing the streaming economy thesis explicitly. So Drake is separating two relationships with cultural content. Streaming is what his work does. Watching is what the audience does. He's positioning his output as flow state, recurring, infrastructure grade, a kind of cultural product that monetizes by accruing repeated plays across a catalog. The audience is the consumer of the watchable artifact. He is the operator of the streamable asset. So this is huge. This is the lyric level version of an analytical claim that catalog economy people have been making for 2 years now. Drake's catalog operates on a streaming primary monetization model that has more in common with Rihanna's catalog, which is still throwing off 7 figures per quarter, despite no new releases from her since 2016, than with traditional album cycle dependent recording artists. The triple entendre density across the Iceman album serves that model. The repeat listen reward is the catalog economy moat. Drake telling the audience, mine is going to stream while you watch in HD, is him stating the catalog economy thesis in his own voice on a #1 single. It's not a metaphor. It's a business model that he's got. I mean, we're sitting here talking about it right now. So hold that thought too. We're going to come back to it because the streaming bar connects to the chorus bar. Swear my label gotta free me connects to the structural exit bar in verse 2. And the three of them stack into a coherent argument about why Drake doesn't need the institution. So verse 1 closes with, they say that karma could take an eternity. Yours is dropping the same night as me. Funny thing is that they ain't gonna compete. You're gonna get yours while I'm doing me. So this is a competitive timing flex. And I think what Drake is saying is my competitors release on the same nights that I do, and they still can't compete. The funny thing is they aren't even trying anymore. They're just absorbing what comes. I'm doing me. And then verse 1 ends with the Janice STFU tag again. The romance, the flex, the streaming bar, the competitive bar. So all of it gets interrupted by the command to shut up. Verse 2 is where the structural exit argument lives. So we're going to spend more time here because this is the most important verse on the song, in my opinion. The verse opens with, tired of all of y'all telling me people is real. I know when it's real. Okay, so this is Drake's authenticity claim. He's saying he's the one who knows what's real. He doesn't need outside voices telling him. And then you only come home to pose and pop off a look, but you forgot how it feel. This is directed at Kendrick. The implication, Kendrick comes back to Compton, but only to pose. He's forgotten how it actually feels to live there. And then Chi-Town popping a pill. Go on a drill looking for someone to kill. This is a Chicago reference, obviously. The Chicago drill scene, the implication is about the violence and the authenticity of street rap and the contrast with Kendrick's posture of moral instruction. And now we get to the most discussed line on the entire song. It's the bar that's launched 100 think pieces so far. White kids listen to you because they feel some guilt, and that's how your soul gets fulfilled. Okay? Aimed at Kendrick, obviously. The argument is that Kendrick's audience composition is structurally white-coded, and the listening behavior is structurally guilt-coded. And that means the consumption pattern is closer to a moral credit transaction than to a music appreciation relationship. So I want to handle this bar pretty carefully here. Writing about it from where I sit or talking about it requires a meta acknowledgement. Obviously, I'm a white old guy, financial analyst, talking about a black artist accusation that another black artist, white audience, consumes the music out of guilt. I'm in the demographic being characterized here. I can't be the one validating the critique without acknowledging the posture that I'm reading from, okay? But what I can say, without crossing into territory that I shouldn't speak from, is the empirical question of who listens to what is answerable. Streaming platform demographic data concert attendance data, merchandise purchase patterns. Both Spotify and Apple have audience composition data that they don't publish, but that's been partially surfaced through industry side leaks and analyst reports. Now, the data on Kendrick's audience composition specifically tilts more white than the genre average. The data on Drake's audience composition tilts more diverse. And that's not a value judgment, that's just measurement. What Drake's line does is take a measurement and he assigns it a motivational explanation. And the measurement is real. The motivation attribution, guilt, is contested. People with closer access to that cultural consumption question than I have are better positioned to argue whether the motivational attribution lands. The structural point that the two artists' audiences differ in composition in measurable ways is harder to argue with, regardless of why those compositions exist. So the bar stays in the song because Drake gets to make the cultural argument from his position. I'm noting that the line exists, what it's claiming structurally, and where it sits inside the song's broader project of denying Kendrick the moral high ground. Anyone wanting to make a deeper read on whether the guilt attribution is fair should go to writers closer to that conversation than I am. So moving on. Handing out turkeys on camera inside of your hood, then you go back to the hills. So he's talking about performative charity. It's an accusation here. Kendrick's handing out turkeys for the cameras in his neighborhood, and then he's retreating to the expensive Hollywood Hills mansion. How many houses you built? How many souls did you heal off the back of your deal? The accusation is monetizing morality, building houses, healing souls. These are PR moves built on top of the record deal infrastructure that funded them. And now we get to the bar that I think is the most important structural argument on the song, and maybe the most important structural argument that Drake has ever made about the music industry. So he says, there's a difference between getting out of your deal and being let out of your deal. Okay, two verbs, one conjunction. The entire structural argument of every label exit conversation in popular music compressed into one line. Let me say it again, because this is the line. There's a difference between getting out of your deal and being let out of your deal. Okay, get out is what an artist does. They work their way out. They exit on their own initiative. They leave on their own terms. So that's agency. Let out is what an institution does to you. The artist is released, permitted to leave. Granted exit, it's permission. So the first is the artist owning their movement, and the second is the institution loosening the rope. Drake aimed this bar at Kendrick, and the implication being that Kendrick's exit from Top Dog Entertainment was the second kind, the being let out kind, where the institution loosened the rope. Kendrick didn't fight his way out of TDE. TDE released him. That's Drake's claim. But the bar's analytical force is general. It applies to every artist negotiating exit from every major. It applies to Drake himself negotiating his own exit from UMG. It applies to Ed Sheeran, who just walked out of Warner 2 weeks ago via the catalog stays distribution only structure that the broader industry is now treating as a template. So the distinction between all of these things matters because the institutional class, people that are at the labels, they've spent the past decade pretending that the two modes are equivalent. The press release always reads, the artist left amicably. We supported the transition. The framing is always institutional. The artist was let go in both directions. But Drake's bar names the asymmetry. Get out is the artist's word. Let out is the institution's. Every other word for label exit is one or the other dressed up to look like the other. So this is the most explicit single line statement of the institutional exit thesis anywhere on the Iceman album. It's more direct than the fighting the man, not suing a rapper line from Bees on the Table, because That line states a posture. This line defines the operational mechanics. Two verbs separated by one conjunction, the whole structural argument compressed. And now you pair that with the chorus bar from earlier. Swear my label gotta free me, baby. So pair them together, okay? The artist understands he must get out on his own terms. The institution will be required to let him out, whether it wants to or not. The asymmetry collapses when the artist's leverage exceeds the institution's grip. And that's what the entire Iceman album is dramatizing across 18 tracks. Janice STFU is the cleanest single track compression of it. Okay, verse 2 continues. Against your will, how many new names do you got on your will? Will as in last will and testament. Drake asking who's going to inherit when Kendrick's gone. The implication being a fragmented succession plan. How many more times is y'all going to keep calling it soft when it's silk? Soft versus silk. Drake's whole career has been characterized as too pop, too soft. Silk is sophisticated, refined, expensive. Drake's repositioning that critique. And now we get to the second power inversion bar. How many more interviews y'all gonna do to get Ice to chill? Conventional framing of Drake's industry position in 2024 and 2025 was that he had been damaged, that he'd been on the back foot, that he was the one who needed to negotiate down from his beef posture. Kendrick had won the round. The press cycle reflected that conventional wisdom. So Drake's line inverts that framing. Y'all are doing interviews to ask me to back off. The plurality of media efforts to diffuse him is the evidence of his power. The institutional class isn't negotiating with him from a position of strength. It's negotiating with him because they need him to chill. The fact that they need to ask repeatedly across multiple platforms in interview after interview is the diagnostic. Okay, so this connects directly to the structural exit bar. Y'all are the institutional voice. Ice is Drake, the Iceman, the artist with the leverage. The interviews are the institutional class trying to negotiate a de-escalation. The song's response is no. The chart record performance of the song is the empirical demonstration of the leverage Drake is claiming. Verse 2 then moves into flex bars. Quilt cover-up reference, Wilt Chamberlain kept it 100, spending behavior, sexual flexes, and then I made too much in a week. Must be 250 at least. Like the money just grew off a tree, like the money just came in for free. $250 million in a week. Money grew off a tree, money came in for free. So this is the streaming catalog economy talking. When your catalog is throwing off this kind of revenue, the money literally comes in for free in the sense that you don't have to work for it. The catalog does the work. This is what the streaming bar from verse 1 was setting up. Then we get MRI machine scanning my knee, like how long you've been running the streets. Okay, so now we've got the sports health flex. Drake's been running the streets long enough that he needs an MRI on his knee. Aging in motion here. She just texted me like, we in Paris, like 200 deep. Paris, okay, international. The entourage shows the scale of Drake's operation. And I went, bought a whip for my brother, same body, but two different colors. And I might just tell Kay, get another. Small price, because he kept it 100. So this is his generosity flex. Bought a car for his brother. Loyalty rewarded. The Kai reference is ambiguous in public. Could be Kai Cenat. Could be someone in Drake's inner circle. But the framing is rewarding people who keep it real. And I might book a flight out to London. So international reference again, mobility flex. And then Janice STFU. So the verse ends with the same tag, romance, flex, structural argument, power, inversion, all of it interrupted by the command to shut up. Okay, take a breath. we've gone bar by bar. I gotta synthesize here. What this song is actually doing structurally is three things all at once. Number one, it's making the cultural authenticity argument against Kendrick. The Sopranos sample maps Kendrick onto Janice, the fake conscious sibling who extracts from the family while pretending to be above the family business. The white kids listen out of guilt bar identifies the audience pattern. The performance charity bar identifies the posture. The whole project denies Kendrick the moral high ground. Number two, it's making the structural exit argument against the institution. The swear my label gotta free me chorus bar pairs with the difference between getting out and being let out verse bar to compress the entire label exit argument into two interlocking lines. The how many more interviews y'all gonna do just to get Ice to chill bar inverts the power dynamic. The institution is the entity negotiating from a position of weakness, asking the artist to back off. And the streaming economy bar from verse one, mine is going to stream while you watch in HD, states the catalog economy thesis explicitly. So Drake's economic position doesn't depend on the institution. Number three, it's making the personal argument for keeping his private life private. The Emiliana chorus structure stages a romance interrupted by surveillance. The Janice STFU tag is the command directed at the surveillance apparatus. The song's title is a request to just be left alone, scaled to the all-time biggest commercial platform. So 3 structural arguments, 1 4-syllable title, 1 4-minute track, a number 1 signal around the world. Now, here's the thing about how these 3 layers connect. The cultural authenticity argument denies Kendrick's moral leverage. The structural exit argument denies the institutional leverage. And the personal argument denies the surveillance leverage. All 3 layers are about the same thing. They're about Drake claiming sovereignty over different domains of his life. Cultural sovereignty, I don't need your validation of my authenticity. Institutional sovereignty, I don't need your permission to leave. Personal sovereignty, I don't need your commentary on my relationships. The song is a sovereignty declaration, made 3 different ways, delivered on the all-time biggest stage Drake has ever stood on. Now let me put this into context as part of the broader story here. This is the 3rd Janice-related stack piece that I've made. First piece, Iceman isn't a comeback album. It's Drake's exit filing, argued on Substack that the album was operationally aimed at restructuring his deal, his catalog, and his go-forward position. Second piece I wrote walked through the Bolloré side dynamics that determine what UMG's options are when Drake exits. Both pieces made the structural argument by inference from the album's posture, from the Lucian Grange by name lyric arc across 14 years, from the January 2025 defamation lawsuit alleging Universal used Kendrick's Not Like Us to devalue Drake's brand for contract extension leverage. Janice STFU is the same argument made explicitly on a single track at chart record-breaking scale, not in code, not by inference, not via Sopranos analogy. Drake says directly, there's a difference between getting out and being let out. My label is going to have to free me. The institutional voices asking me to chill are the evidence. I'm the one with the leverage, and mine is going to stream while you watch in HD. Each one of those bars is a thesis statement. You stack them, the artist owns the exit. The institution will be compelled. The negotiations are happening from the institution's position of weakness, and the catalog economy will keep paying. Variety's review of the album characterized it as a fun and vindictive comeback record. The mainstream press read missed the structural argument entirely. Calling Iceman a comeback record assumes Drake was trying to come back, which assumes he was gone, which assumes the institutional class still held the position from which he had departed. The structural read says, no, Drake didn't depart. The institutional class is the entity in retreat, and the album is the operational statement of his structural advantage during the institution's negotiated dissent. That reading isn't in the trade press, it's in the verse. There's a difference between getting out of your deal and being let out of your deal. For anyone willing to read that line for what it actually says, you pair this with Ed Sheeran's Warner exit 2 weeks ago, catalog stays at Warner, go for distribution only via Gingerbread Man Records, first billions streams artist to exit a major on amicable distribution only terms with the catalog staying. Sheeran proved a top 3 global act can leave a major on artist favorable terms. The structural template exists. Drake's Janice STFU bar names the distinction that template embodied. So the case stack now looks like this. The conditions for Drake's exit were materializing. That was the Iceman as exit filing argument from May. Universal's options on the other side of that exit were constrained by the Bolloré side dynamics. That was the May 16 piece I wrote. The structural template for an artist favorable exit got proven. That was Sheeran leaving Warner. Drake states the structural argument explicitly on his own record, and that's Janice STFU. 3 layers of the same case landing within a fortnight. The argument has gone from inferential to explicit, from speculative to demonstrated, from my analysis of Drake's lyrics to Drake's own articulated structural position. So when you hear the trade press call Iceman a fun and vindictive comeback, ask yourself, what would have to be true for that read to make sense? It would have to be true that Drake was gone, that he was trying to come back, that the institutional class still held the position from which he had departed. The structural read says that none of this is true. Drake didn't depart. The institutional class is the entity in retreat. The Iceman album is not Drake's comeback. It's the operational statement of his structural advantage during the institution's negotiated dissent. Variety couldn't say that, though, because the trade press is structurally tied to the institution itself. The trade press's job is to write the institutional narrative. Drake's job on this track is to put the institutional narrative in writing so it can be permanently disputed. The exit isn't being made in code anymore, and it's not being made by inference. It's not being made in my analysis. It's being made on a #1 single on the Hot 100. Drake's own voice, Drake's own words, permanent public record, and that's the receipt.